All right, everybody. Thank you for being with us here on Sounds About Right. I'm your boy Nibs520. With me, as always, I got my man Jeremy with me. Say what's up to the folks. There he is.
It's Sunday. Good morning.
Good morning. Today we got a very special and lovely guest. Makes the both of us look ugly as hell. Her name is Brittany with the melanin. She is a longtime friend. Say what's up, everybody.
What's up, everybody? I'm glad to be on here. Thank you for asking me to be a part of this. Very excited to get into these topics.
Thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. Now,
Yes, sir.
our showrunner Tanya is going to kill me because I'm going off topic a little bit here. But before we do anything, I know we addressed this earlier in the week. I got to say and wish my man happy birthday, happy born day, Mr. Jeremy. Last Wednesday, this past Wednesday on the 13th, had another revolution around the sun.
Thank you, sir.
Just kidding. Cancer, okay. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Before we get into our topics, man, other than that, how's everybody doing today? You feeling all right?
I
Over the
think I'm
weekend, I'm feeling great.
Yeah, I know you talking about you want some money. I'm jealous. We get out
Some
of here.
UFC, some boxing, and in the stock market, one got a little bit of change.
Oh, see, this is our money man over here. All right, so getting into today, we got some juicy ones. We might get canceled before we get started off of here. So first things first, we're going to get into this Roe versus Wade reversal. Just to kind of give you guys some background. In 1973, Roe v. Wade was a landmark decision of the U.S. Supreme Court in which the court ruled that the Constitution of the United States conferred the right to have an abortion. The decision struck down many federal and state abortion laws and fueled an ongoing abortion debate in the United States about whether to not extend abortion rights should be legal. So now the Justice Department announced that they were going to, or the court overturned the Roe v. Wade, which leaves it up to the states to decide which will, you know, how basically women can have their reproductive rights. So now that we didn't got that out the way, let's dive into what we feel about this. And I want to start with Brittany. As a woman, this affects you more than it ever will me or Jeremy. What's your opinion on this overturn?
It's pretty scary. I feel like we should be progressing as a country, and it feels like every few months we keep going backwards, like back into olden times or something. I feel like the scariest part of this situation is in some states, even if your life is possibly in danger, it's a question whether you can get an abortion or not. So it's really scary. And then I know you guys have probably heard of like young children getting raped, becoming pregnant. And now, like, I believe the most recent thing was a 10-year-old girl is pregnant and she's had to travel to another state to get an abortion. And it's just causing a huge uproar. This personally, I feel like I've known, women in many cases, health wise, financial wise, that have had to turn to abortions. Um, just recently, not even, I would say in May, a family member came to me and we had all went on like a family trip and she wasn't feeling good and we just thought maybe she might have drank a little bit too much. And then a few days later, she's like, "Hey guys, I found out why I was sick." And it was because she's pregnant. And she almost didn't even make the trip. We had to, she made the trip, but it was a real tight squeeze for her. So financially, she's just not there. She honestly thought she could never get pregnant. This is her first pregnancy, and she's like, in her 30s. So it was a surprise for her, and she's just not financially ready. And we just had a conversation. I was like, unfortunately, this was in May. So I was like, unfortunately, you're going to have to make a decision very soon because you might not even be able to get an abortion once you decide. So you're going to have to she was kind of forced to make a decision, and she was still kind of thinking about it, kind of thing. But I just ultimately feel like there's a lot of men behind the scenes that have made this a thing now. And ultimately, I feel like this is the woman's body. This is our body. This is our choice. And it's being taken from us. I just feel really strongly too about the health. The baby, sometimes you can be pregnant and the baby can get stuck into your fallopian tubes, and that can be deadly if it's not caught. The only way to get that done is by a medical abortion. So it's very scary that our life can be on hold. And honestly, as a Black woman, if I become pregnant, my chances of surviving that pregnancy are, very low based on any other race. A Black woman giving birth, your life is in danger. A lot of those times, mainly a lot of it is because you're Black and it's being ignored. When you say you're in pain or what have you, a lot of doctors um, don't really take that into consideration. So now it's even scarier being a Black woman. You better hope that this health issue doesn't affect you, where are they going to give you an abortion when it comes time, if you are facing a health issue where you need an abortion. It's just very scary times. And I'm very glad right now I'm not in a situation, but I've definitely known people in the past that have had to make that decision for various reasons.
Yeah, I mean that's for you. So I mean, this is affecting you and people in your family now because, like you said, you've got a family member who just found out in May, a couple months ago that she's pregnant, and she's in her 30s, which is that can put you like you spoke to, especially for people of color, you know pregnancies in your 30s are higher risk, obviously than in your teenager or 20s. Let me ask you this. If and I know that this isn't your situation, but if you were put in a situation where you had to deal with what your family members dealing with, and somebody's telling you, hey, yeah, no, you've got to keep that baby, what is your personal response to that, or what would you do in that situation?
And that's the part that's so scary. You know, I've seen some states or some, post out there on social media that are like, hey, if you ever need to travel to my state to get something done, let me know. Where there's, women are kind of getting together and having this secret pact that they will help other women be able to make this choice. I feel like it's going to end up being like some black market abortions going on. There's many women that just either your choice, financial health wise, that just can't don't want to have the baby at that time. I would probably be one of those ones trying to find another state to get it done if I was faced in this situation, to be honest.
I mean, it's you're right. I mean, it's one of those things where I do believe that again, this is affecting women obviously much more than it does affect men, but it does also affect us as well. So as an example, like you're married, Brittany. So if you and your husband get pregnant, that's a decision. I'm assuming that you guys would still make together. Obviously, you would have ultimate veto on that because it is your body. But that is a discussion that you guys would have together. With so Jay, when my question to you would be, if you and your old lady get pregnant and she comes to you and says, hey, this is a discussion I'm trying to have, as a man, how do you think that affects you going forward if you guys make that decision together to have an abortion and the state comes back and tells you no, you can't do that?
Well, if she wants to go forward with it, I mean, just plain and simple, we're gonna have to go somewhere else to have it. It's just that simple. I mean, there's no gray area, but at the same time, I see it that this Roe versus Wade is no different from hundreds of other legislations that state ran. Same thing with guns. Driver's license fluctuate depending on what state, and at the same time, a lot of people are saying that men get the final say because of the judges, but they had the final say when they turned it into the law in the first place. We can't get around men making laws in this country. You know what I'm saying? So if it's a woman's right, at the end of the day in United States, there's going to be men at the majority who's going to write the legislation so we can do what we want to do or let the women do what they got to do. But the only thing that I do disagree with, I think is kind of getting out of hand because the amount of abortion since 1973, we're
Hmm.
talking 68 million abortions. And from that 68 million, it got to be a small percentage when we're talking about uh, the mother possibly dying from childbirth, molestation, and rape. I can't see out of the 68 million how many of those are actually justifiable. Another part is what that we're talking about is financial. Now, a woman might say it's not our we don't have a say, and financially it's gonna hurt them. They can't afford the baby. But when they have the baby, then it's our responsibility financially. So in the way I see it, we can't have it both ways. When you want it, we're responsible. When you don't want it, we don't have any say.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of men feel that way as well. And a lot of and not to crack jokes, but I mean, was watching that. What was it? The Dave Chappelle, not the closer, but I think it was Sticks and Stones. He, he said, hey, if it's a woman's right to decide whether or not she can have the baby, it should be my right to own whether or not I should, be responsible financially for it, right? And I think a lot of people feel that way, especially if I don't have a say in whether or not you can have a kid, if you get pregnant by me, then you shouldn't have a say in whether or not I should have to pay for it. You know what I mean? So with that being said, do you think this will affect people in the poorer end of the spectrum than it will people who've got money? I'll leave that open to the floor.
Most definitely, because I think with that big percentage, I mean, it's crazy because, they say a lot of abortions are like a big percentage of them are like Black women, women of color in poverty. So I mean, there's like, some of them are like there's funds available if you can afford it, but I definitely think it will go down, especially if you're in a place that is not approving of these abortions. Because I mean, they probably had to get the other abortions funded, and now you might have to travel to another state. It's not cheap to go to another state, gas, all of that. So I definitely think it will become a thing of who can afford it and who can't.
So with longer term effects, right? Because when you take into consideration, we're not just talking about abortions here. Because if women are forced to have these children that are unwanted because they did want to get an abortion, right? We're looking at more children ended up in foster care, more children being put up for adoption. This has a domino effect later on down the road, right? More kids being left in trash cans or at the fire department. you know this is a These are things that a lot of people don't want to talk about, right? Because let's face it, right now, or prior to this overturning, it was 100%. You could go to a fire department, go to an emergency room. Nobody asks you any questions. You give your baby up, and you know you can go on about your business. Say, I don't want this, and people were still, trying to have homemade abortions or leaving their kids in dumpsters. Do you think with now this overturning, this is something that increases, now because now they don't have an option and, it's illegal to go down there and get it done.
It's making it worse for the minority because you're right. They don't have the funds to go somewhere else because technically they're treating this as a kind of a specialty when it comes to a procedure. You got to go out of state. You can't go out of state. And now you don't want to give birth, and you might have to go through, I guess, illegal parameters to get rid of this child. So now you're a criminal. 3 months ago, you can just go to wherever you got to go to get the procedure done, but now you're a targeted criminal, and that's mostly from uh, the impoverished or the lower middle class, even some middle class. Especially with how the economy is, you just can't afford it now.
I rarely chime in, but
See, yeah,
even to that effect, speaking of women who wind up having a miscarriage, they're looking at potentially criminalizing them for saying that, they didn't take care of their bodies. When you look at the numbers from 1973, like you said, if it's something where about 51% are going to clinics and about 35% are that is an actual abortion clinic, right? So that means that the other
mm,
49% is being done at hospitals and things of that nature. If they're happening at hospitals, then the chances are is that it's something that's medically needed. It's something where
right.
it's a tubal ligation or something where the mother's life is in jeopardy, or the child is just simply in the second or third trimester and already dead in the womb, right? So when they have to have those medically, are you going to criminalize that? Or are they going to criminalize the miscarriages? And if so, if not to switch topic big time, but if a man that the husband is beating his wife and he causes the miscarriage, is he going to be held as just as accountable for
Mm,
that miscarriage as she is? It's just such a gray area, and I just think that that needs to be pointed out. It's not just about the abortion or not abortion; it's all the other parts of the reproductive rights that women have that are just being overlooked.
right.
I agree,
Well, when
and
that
and
man causes it, he should be. The man causes the abortion, he needs to be prosecuted.
Agreed.
yeah, because I mean, right now, right, or before this overturning, if you killed a pregnant woman, wasn't that a double homicide?
Yep.
You know, so if you cause the the abort, the baby to to be not be able to be born. I mean, I would assume that's still going to be a thing where you can face criminal charges. Um, I guess to play devil's advocate here, my next question to again to the floor is there any upside to this overturning? Maybe not for us personally, but in the long run, does anybody see this actually helping us in any way?
No, and they're gonna come for other rights, and that's what's the scariest part. If they come for loving alone, which is being able to be in an interracial relationship, half of the country is screwed.
Yeah, that actually walks me right into my next point. What's next, right? If they're overturning women's rights to have or not have a child, what's the next thing they come for after that, right?
But they're only overturning it for it to be a state right. In beginning, I was saying there's hundreds of legislations that are state rights, but nobody's mentioning those. Now, I understand that this abortion thing is more important than all the other rights combined, but at the same time, there has to be, and I don't think it's leading it to a state right, but there has to be some type of amendment where 68 million, that's just too much to me. I just feel that's too much since 1973. Like
Yeah,
you
they
can use the categories about the medical procedure, somebody the mother might is in danger, but 60 something million, that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, they are still leaving it up to the states to decide whether or not, so each individual state, as you guys have alluded to, Brittany said, hey, there's women's, sites out there, they're linking up together saying, hey, come to this state, you can come and get it done. But, again, as you guys alluded to, not everybody, can afford to travel, to these states where it might be legal, but it is they're leaving it up to the states. I think right now they're fighting to get it, reversed again, get it put back the way it is. If this does end up being the long term solution, right? If it goes back to court and they say nope, we're going to leave it overturned. How do you see things going from there? Brittany, I'll direct that to you first.
Like I was saying earlier, like I feel like I do agree 68 million sounds like a huge number, but if they completely take this away, I feel like it's definitely going to go like to some black market underground abortions. And then there's a lot of doctors too that are saying because they're abortion doctors, a lot of healthcare fields, they're not going to be able to find jobs because it's saying that a lot of healthcare places don't want to necessarily hire those specialized doctors, so they're going to be out of work. When push comes to shove, we've all had to hustle for money to make ends meet. I feel like definitely gonna like turn into like some underground stuff, and like you guys are saying, like that legally, people are gonna be facing charges for stuff like this. It's just gonna get out of hand. I feel like, and then especially with poverty, being broke, whatever, and having to find another state. And some people aren't even educated on that or even know that you can travel somewhere else. So if you really want an abortion, if it's you're just getting one because you just weren't ready or you just can't, you're not with the baby's father anymore or something, those are going to be a lot of the ones where I feel like are going to be going down like I think the old school way they used to say, like wire hanger abortions, where
Right.
they're going in there with not even the proper tools, just pulling on whatever they can pull on to get the baby out of you. It's gonna get out of hand. We're gonna definitely hear some wild stories for sure.
Yeah, I can speak to that. My mother was a nurse for over 30 years, and when she first got assigned, her first assignment at the university hospital, she was in the abortion. They called it the abortion ward. And this was back in the 70s, early 80s, where women didn't really know, hey, where do I go to get these things done, or people of color and people who were economically disadvantaged were just trying to do it themselves because there was no education on, hey, this is where you can go to get it safely done, etc. Right? And she said the one thing that almost made her not want to be a nurse anymore was, in 1 week they had over 150 wire hanger abortions come through, her office alone. And
Wow.
having to see that, you know almost made her give up being a nurse. But then it reinforced her being a nurse because she wanted to be there for these women to help them and educate them and say, hey, look, don't do this again. This is what we're here for. You come here. If you don't have an option, come here. This was back when the you could go down and get an abortion for free. You'd have to wait for a few days. You know what I'm saying? But you could get it done. And I think that you're right. I think that now is a time for again, people to vote, people to get out there, and this is why they say every vote counts. Get out there, make sure you're reading up on what it is you're voting about. Make sure you're reading up on the candidates you're voting for, and make sure that you're educating yourselves on what you can do for you and the people in your communities. With that being said, I think we've got this is a topic we could probably go on for years about, unfortunately. And my hope is that we get this wrapped up quickly. Now we're going to jump from the frying pan into the fire. So now we're going to talk about the rainbow, folks. Get out your Skittles.
Uh-oh.
All right. So I brought this up. I work for a boxing site as well, and we brought this up. There was a female to male trans boxer who came in 2018, had their first professional fight. Two hours before the fight is when the opponent found out that they were fighting a trans person. Didn't have a chance to get out of it. Had that one fight, hasn't had a fight since because no one will fight them. No one will fight them, knowing that it used to be a woman. So I wanted to touch on the trans people in sports conversation because I think it's becoming more and more prevalent now. We're seeing more of it, and just to kind of give again context to what we're talking about, right? Transgender people, by definition, have a gender identity or gender expression that differs from the sex that they were assigned at birth. Some transgender people who desire medical assistance to transition from one sex to another identify as transsexual. So those are who we're going to be talking about mainly. Um, and I also want to make sure that we make this point that people understand that being transgender or transsexual is not necessarily or in any way tied into your sexual orientation. A lot of transgender people identify as straight. They don't identify as gay or lesbian or bisexual or otherwise. In some cases, they decline altogether to even define themselves. But with the transgenders in sports conversation, there's a number of them that are out here, and they're I'm me personally, I'm seeing that it's been more male to female, but again, there have been the one the handfuls that have gone from female to male. What's your perspective on that, Jay? We'll lead with you since looks like Brittany's having some technical issues.
Well, I will say with the when it comes to sports, this is similar to the abortion where it matters mostly for the women because those are the ones the women's positions are the ones that's at stake. So when it's a man who's now transitioning to a woman and they have all this, I guess, male genetics that's been in a system for God knows how long, now they just transition. Now they're overtaking the sport. That's just another woman who's down a job. Because what's going to happen if a man transitions to a woman? Now they want to play in the WNBA. Off camera, I was talking to Nibs, and minimum wage for WNBA $57,000. A lot of men could take that position next season, and all they got to do is say, "I identify." Then
Right.
there's gonna be no jobs for any woman in the WNBA. So this is more than the women have to protect themselves, but the same thing with the abortion. All this legislation is done by men, and there's no
Yeah,
way
because
around it.
I mean, when we were talking about that, right? What we're saying is that the rules have changed, and there have been some changes since the Leah Thomas situation, right? Since she came
Right.
out and ESPN caught on, but prior to that, you needed to have had your transition for 12 months, right?
A year.
Before right for before you could be considered to compete in that division. Again, whether you're a trans male or a trans woman, you had to be at least 12 months into your transition before you can compete with the sex that you now being assigned to.
Right.
And I brought this up because I'm not a trans person. I'm not in that community, so I didn't want to speak out of turn. But I've looked up a lot of these trans athletes. There are a lot of I looked up Caitlyn Jenner's interview with the Pivot. I don't know if anybody's watched that, but shout out to them. They're doing great work. This is a former Olympic decathlete. So we're talking
Right.
about the top athletes in the world, right? They don't get enough love. This is one of the best athletes in the world. Said straight up, we shouldn't be competing. There's no way a naturally born male should be competing against women. And Caitlyn Jenner is saying that her transition has been ongoing for 7 years, and at 7 years she still shouldn't be competing against naturally born women because
Right.
she's still hitting a golf ball, you know, 300 yards off the tee. You know what I mean? So there's no comparison there. We kind of got Jay's initial take on that, and Brittany, I kind of want to get your take on that. If you have a someone that or just in general, what is your take on transgender being taking part in sports with their now assigned sex?
I'm pretty open about the topic. To be honest, I feel like if you're trans and you want to get out there and play, if you've given yourself, if you were once a woman and you've transed into man and you want to get out there with the NFL and get out there and get roughed up, that's your prerogative. Get out there. I mean, you're um saying you are a man now. So get out there and play those real men games. Get roughed up. That's what they signed up for. We want to be inclusive, so that's a part of inclusive. Get out there, get in the boxing ring if that's your prerogative. Get out there and do it. Um it's kind of crazy though, cuz on the like if you're a man trans into a woman and you want to get out there, I feel like there is a little bit of an advantage though. So I'm pretty open about it, but I feel like if a woman trans into a man, okay. I don't know, maybe I don't know, but a man transing into a woman to play women's sports, I feel like there's a bit of an advantage, a bit of extra strength there that kind of makes it a little bit of an unfair playing field.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
that's coming from the woman.
right now, and again, we were talking about this when we were talking about the abortion rights, right? And Jay, you alluded to this. It is something that affects the naturally born women because we I had this conversation with a trans person, and they refused to answer the direct question. And the direct question I had was, if you were saying that naturally born men can compete with naturally born women, because that's what a trans person is, right? Let's take our feelings out of it and let's call it what it is. A naturally born man is competing with naturally born women. If we're saying we're okay with that, then why don't we take away the men's and women's sports altogether and just call it sports, right? So let's take away the
Because women
WNBA.
wouldn't have a job. And we got to protect women from keeping their income. So we got to get these trans people out of the women's sports.
And the women's sports income is low as is because we all know the women aren't getting the same pays.
Right. But when you were gone, I was telling Nibs, WNBA minimum wage is $57,000. A man will easily say, "I'm a woman" for $57,000.
Yeah, and I think their initial contracts are what, 3 4 years, something like that, out the gate.
Right.
Yeah, and I want to allude to this, right? So I just looked it up just to kind of be fair, right? I don't want to sit up here and say we're bashing trans people because we're not. I think anyone who decides to live their life how they want to live it, you have the right to do so with as much dignity as the world will allow you, right? When we're talking about trans people in sports, we're talking about fairness in the sport. I grew up playing sports as most people did. We all are a fan of some kind of sports team, right? You look at the people who are the same sex in their sport who got caught cheating, they're pariahs. You look
Right.
at the Lance Armstrongs. He was the top of the world. Everybody loved this dude.
Right.
I mean, and then we find out not only is he cheating, but I mean, he is cheating hard, you know. Now he can't get a job working at McDonald's. Most, you look at what's the girl's name from track and field, Marion.
Marion Jones.
Marion Jones. She was winning gold medals left and right. Find out she was juicing since high school. And this is someone who is a naturally born woman competing against naturally born women. But because she had an advantage, right? And an unfair advantage, now she's a pariah. She can't get a job anywhere. No one wants to work with a cheater, right? And I'm not saying that all trans people are going to get in and they're doing this to cheat. I don't think the Leah Thomas situation is a situation like that. But when you can't tell me, at least in my opinion, that you take a person who, when competing as a man, was ranked in the 4 to 500 range and is now ranked in the top 10 this past year, and all the events that she competed in was finishing in the top 10 and is ranked now as high as 30th in the country for all women swimmers, right? Went from 500 to 30th and won a national title in an event she had no chance of winning as a man, right? And just to give context for anybody who knows swimming, if you're a second behind, right, in swimming, you're not even in the field, right? Most swimming competitions, just as to give context to this, Leah Thomas won the event in the 100 meters. The fastest male time is 44.84. The fastest women's time was 47.15. That's almost 3 seconds off. And if you're coming in at 47 seconds as a man, you're not even in you're not in the event, right? Because you look at
300,
right. So the question then becomes, can you explain how that is not an advantage? How you go from 300 to 30th and have top 10 finishes and win a national title where you were nowhere near that before?
Of course it is. It's an advantage because on top of that, you can't give me an example of it going the other way. There's no example of a woman transition into a man and they're now competing with the men and they're flourishing. There's no example of that.
Mostly because they won't let women in those spaces to be even able to compete as it is. So I think the biggest thing, and Nigel and I probably it was like 2 months ago, talked about this piece, which is that why not have people compete based off of their testosterone levels? Because there are women who are doing shot put and discus and doing better at throwing those things and doing those things than some men are. So why not? And if you want to level the playing field, especially when it comes to Olympic sports, I know that the NBA and the WNBA is solely going to always be separated. That's never going to change. But when we're looking at Olympics and things where it is a male and female within the same country per se, why not do it based off of testosterone?
Go by the T levels. That's as fair as you can get. They had a sprinter from Africa, this woman whose her testosterone levels were
too high.
They're higher than regular.
Yeah,
but she's a natural woman.
And they try to withdraw her from it.
I think they did, her and her sister. So her sister is like a junior national champion, and she's actually in the Olympics. And both her and her sister just naturally, it's probably just a genetics thing, right? Have super high testosterone. That's probably why they're as good at women athletes as they are. And they were told they can't compete. So
now a man who's been a man for 25 years transitions to a woman for a year, and now your levels are low, but that doesn't mean anything when it comes to a high bone density rate. How much torque you can gain when it comes to running because the density of your bones is still male. Those are advantages. And now now in this situation, a man is going to have to defend and help the woman from preserving their situation. Because I don't want a transitional person to take the livelihood of a woman.
My
so
question
they just might have to have a whole new sport.
My question, and I want to touch on that really quickly, but I want to ask this question to the ladies really quick. Jim, I'm going to come back to your point.
Right.
Ladies, I'm a girl dad, right? I've got daughters. My oldest is a trans woman, and I'm gonna tell you this: my oldest is 6'3", 175 pounds. If she decided to start MMA tomorrow, I would kick her ass because I would say, "There's no way you should be fighting because you went through puberty as a man, right? You should be not fighting naturally born women." Now, with that being said, the question I have to you ladies is if someone you knew or if daughters, cousins, family member was getting into a combat sport and you found out that their opponent was a trans woman, would you be okay with that?
I mean, as somebody who played 2 years of high school football myself, like I'm 5'2", and back then I weighed 145 pounds. Did I belong on a field with a bunch of men that were pushing 250? Probably not, for my own safety. So that would be the only thing that I would say no to, is is exactly that. Like if you're not fully transitioned, for the sake of your child, she would have to go through dropping her testosterone and getting to a level of estrogen before she would even be able to enter the sport. So even though there is the bone density, there is like a little bit more strength that's going to be there just naturally, just from the way that the body is built. You have to remember that that estrogen is going to knock that down. It's going to weaken it like so a lot. You know what I mean? And so it does start to become a little bit more of a level playing field. It's not going to be 100%, but let's say, my son was going to be fighting somebody that was trans. Like, I'd be like, whoop their ass. I don't care if that person was once a female and now is a male. Like, you go for the throat. Like, it's competition. If they want to step in the ring with you, you go for blows. Like, that's period, point blank. But that's just my take on it. Is being a student athlete who has been on a playing field with men. Like, I know that it's a safety issue. That's how I broke my ankle in 3 spots. So I see it both ways. But if you are truly transitioning, then your estrogen is going to break down your system from being so um, male oriented. You know what I mean? So yeah, they should still be able to be in sports, in my opinion.
Okay. How about you, Brittany? What do you think?
It's kind of a gray area. There's so much gray to that because, like I was saying earlier, and like Tanya was saying, get in there. That's what you chose to do. Get in there, whoop their ass, go for the throat. But then, like you were saying, your daughter, she went through puberty as a man, or as a young man. So she has that testosterone. I don't know if you guys have heard of it's a TV show called I Am Jazz, and it's a gender. She's a female, but she was born male, and pretty much from like the age of 2, she always only identified as a girl. She never claimed anything as a little boy. So I think her family, um, when I believe at the age of 9, she started taking meds so that she did not go through puberty as like rapid as a male would. So she actually, y- I can't tell because she's been on those meds for so long. She's totally female. So I feel like somebody like that, it would be fair because she didn't go through that testosterone. Her voice never changed. She never got facial hair. She has breasts that grew naturally and all of this. So she started at the age of like 9 taking those meds. So it's a little gray there, because I know I wouldn't want, if I had kids, if I had a daughter, I would not want them toe to toe. with your daughter.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of men that would want to go toe to
But
toe
I
with
wouldn't
my
mind
daughter.
if they fought Jazz. I wouldn't
Yeah.
mind if they fought Jazz because Jazz is she looks completely female to me. I would have never guessed that she ever was even born a boy, but I feel like it's it's a little gray there. I guess maybe on how they look is how I would go with that because I definitely know would not want my daughter in the ring with your daughter.
So here's a point that somebody else brought up, and this wasn't me. This wasn't again. I don't have a feeling in it, right? I take my feelings out of this conversation because I feel if we get into our feelings in this conversation, it goes down a whole different rabbit hole, right? And I was speaking with online to a trans athlete who I won't mention due to their request, right? Because they're currently competing and has not reported that they're a trans athlete. And I've through them was able to find out there are a lot of trans athletes currently competing, especially in the college and high school levels, that aren't reporting that they're trans so that they can compete because of the rules and the changes that have occurred. My question that I posed to them is I said, okay, I think everybody was kind of okay with the Leah Thomas situation because this was a person who was ranked 300, right? And then came over. So she wasn't blowing everybody out. She still, top 10 finishes. That's respectable. Won one national title. My question is what happens when you take the person or the man who was ranked fourth, fifth, sixth, right? These are people that are missing the podium by this much, by a second or half a second, less a tenth of a second, right? We've all watched, you know, the Olympics and in track and field where a race finishes and the top three finishers all their second times are all the same, but it's that point whatever difference, right?
Right.
You take that guy who comes in fourth and he's saying, well, shit, if I go over to women's sports and then they do dominate and they do, win everything going forward because they were quite literally a point away, 0.02 away from being the number one in their position as a man. Do we have the same feeling or are we just as okay with that as we are with the Jazzes who were, started their transitions much earlier and, grew up more on the female side than the male side coming up and is competing probably a lot more fairly than someone who started their transition later? Are we just as okay with both of those transitions?
I think it goes back to what you said earlier, right? Which is that they have to be transitioned for a full 12 months. So it's not like I'm going to go today I'm a woman, tomorrow I'm going to be a man just to participate in this one thing and then the day after I'm going to become a woman again. So I think that that has to be looked at, right? So if they are truly transitioning, then they're going to have that waiting period and again, once that estrogen starts to get placed into their system and they have to go through that, it's going to naturally knock them down a couple of notches and make them more feminine. It's literally science, you know what I mean? So it's not like it can be like today I'm a woman, tomorrow I'm a man, the following day I'm a woman. That's not how it works.
So you remember with the Thomas situation, how the other competitors responded. The other people in the women in the race, they didn't allow it at all. So what do we label them? What do we label the people who's actually affected by these rules who don't like it? What do we call them? Do we call them
Women?
I don't know. Are they right?
Losers?
Are they
No.
biased? Or are they discriminating? And these are the women who's losing. And to me, it's almost like they should have the final say, and nobody's really listening to the ones who is it's affecting the most. It don't matter what I think. I'm not competing. But when the
Fair point.
women don't want to take a picture with Leah Thomas, they don't want nothing to do with her, and they just got to take it in the chin. coming from someone who isn't even in the sport. To me, that's just unfair. They just got to deal with it.
Yeah, and I to my point, earlier in the point that we were making earlier, right, is that yes, I get that there's a transition period. You do have to, Tanya's right. You are going to have changes, and I want to be very clear. Leah Thomas's transition actually started 3 years prior to her competing as a woman. She didn't come out as trans until 2 years prior, and then she had to go through the 1 year waiting period. So she had actually started her treatments 3 years in advance, a good year before she came out as trans, did a year after that, and then decided to compete as a woman and had to do the 12 months. So let's be very clear. It wasn't like she started her transition 12 months before competing. It was a good 3 years into her hormone treatments and all that before she started to compete. My my point was is again, even with that, right? Is there an advantage? Because again, we're talking about someone who goes ranked 300th to 30th or 500th to 30th and is now winning as opposed to not having a chance at all at these national titles. Can we say that there's an advantage, or should there be a trans sport, right? So should there be male, female, and trans? I know a lot of
League.
people are pushing for that.
Well, according to the other contestants, the women, they think it's unfair.
I
Or
want
do
to
we
know
just call them haters?
when she was ranked 300th on the male side, how far along was she in that transition? Was she taking the female hormones? I wonder, if she had been, how long was she in the transition when she was ranking 300th? I would,
300.
yeah.
So what I'm looking at right now is her freshman year. She didn't do any and was ranked 412th as in now when we say 412th, we're talking about all swimmers, not just one specific 100-meter, 50-meter. Like, this is all swimmers. Was ranked 412th at that time. Then started the transition. Mind you, she had to sit out a year, uh, and then did the transition, and then joined the year before joining the women's team. Actually swam with with the men's team as a trans woman, and then and then got the approval to swim with the men's team. So I want to say there was 2 years of 1 year of swimming with the men, and then 1 year swimming with the women, where she was actually competing with the um, with the transition. So I want to say there was 1 year she competed without it as a freshman, and then 3 years.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But there were only 2 years where she was actually competing because they had to sit. She sat out a year, and then came back.
As of November 2021, she had already had 30 months of hormone therapy.
Yeah. Now there was another trans athlete, again, female to male. CC Telfair was a trans woman who competed on the Franklin Pierce University men's track and field team in 2016 and 2017. She competed in the 400-meter hurdles. Now, the reason this was getting attention is because of the differences in the sport, right? So with Leah Thomas, you get in the water's the same no matter whether you're a man or a woman, right? It's just you swimming in it. With the hurdles, the hurdle height in the men's division was 36 inches, and she ranked 200th in both in 2016 and 390th in 2017. Now, mind you, in 2017 was fully into the transition. So whether that affected or their ranking as a man or not, we can discuss that. Telfair then won the women's 400 meters, where the hurdle height is 30 inches as opposed to 36 in 2019, and was ranked again in the top 10 in every event after going through the testosterone suppression treatment. So I think we're having this always comes back to more the male to female transition because I think it's,
Not,
you know,
not more,
yeah,
only.
yeah.
Give me one example of the opposite.
Well, the boxer that can't compete, right?
Yeah. So and to that point, that boxer did win their first match, right, by unanimous decision, and has had every fight since then canceled because the other side refuses to fight.
So it's a man transition into a woman.
It was a woman that transitioned into a man and was actually a national
What happened
championship.
with the first fight?
Got a unanimous decision against the other
Okay.
guy. Now, again, the fighter that she faced was advised 2 hours prior to the fight that this was a trans woman. He said that it wouldn't have mattered; he still would have fought him. But his management said, had they known that in advance, they would have pulled him from the fight. So, again, this is a person who probably wouldn't get any fights,
You just took a L.
and I think that goes into whether it's right or wrong, right? I'm not saying it is. I think, again, to Tanya's point and to Brittany's point earlier, hey, if you get in that ring, you man enough to step into the ring, you man enough to get your ass whipped, right? That's
Right.
that is what it is. But I think as men, naturally born men, I should say, when they're being advised, hey, they're going to be fighting a trans man, it's a lose lose for them, because if they in that fraternity of boxers, right? If you win, well, you beat up a dude who used to be a woman. If
Right.
you lose, you got your ass whooped by a woman. Again, not
Right.
saying that that's what it is, but that's how it's looked at, right? Let's be real,
That's the
right?
perception. Hmm.
Right. So I think obviously that plays into her. Now she might be able to get in there and whoop these dudes' asses, as a male boxer, but he's not getting that opportunity because everybody knows he used to be a woman. In the reverse of that, right? There was, I believe it was Fallon Fox was fighting MMA. Her dream was to get into the UFC. Used to be a man, was fighting as a woman, and Dana White flat out said, "You never fight in the UFC. It's just not going to happen." So, you know, is there a fairness of going both ways for this? Um, but it does seem to be, a dominated trans woman uh, field here, because, like you said, there's, a lot of them are winning.
It's really telling, I guess is the correct way to say it. It's really telling that so many athletes who, especially like on the soccer field, um, they so many athletes that come out of soccer, especially women, when they go through transitioning, they don't do it after their career is over and said and done because of that fact. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the same thing with men and athletes too. That's what's not being talked about, is that so many people put off switching and changing because of the fact that they know that they can't do what they're basically created to do. You know what I mean? And that's, could you imagine like being stuck in a body that you don't want to be in and you have to, just because of like this job, this thing that you're good at? Like I can't imagine that.
No, I mean, I woke up this morning and looked down and was very thankful for my penis. But, I'll say this, right? And I say that jokingly, but I'll be the first one to say, if I woke up today or tomorrow and I look down and I said, "What the fuck is that?" You know, why do I have a penis? There should be a vagina there, or I should have breasts. Why do I have facial hair? You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't imagine that. Like, it would scare the shit. The thought of being trapped in somebody else's body scares the shit out of me. I'll be the first one to admit that. So the fact that, I appreciate what trans people have to go through, because that is something I don't know if I'd be able to deal with, to be honest with you. So the fact that a lot of them are dealing with it the way that they are, and they are brave enough to come forward and take their transitions, hats off to them. My question, and only question, is it fair in sports for a naturally born man to compete with a naturally born woman, when we see that more often than not, a naturally born man goes into the naturally and starts competing against naturally born women and has a much higher rate of success than naturally born women do when they transition and start competing against naturally born men. I mean, we can't argue those facts. I mean, it's just hard to say. I mean, how many naturally born women do you see in the NFL, the NBA? You know, uh, how many trans athletes do you
None.
think can compete against Usain Bolt? I mean,
Right.
things like that.
But the participants, that's where the women don't want it. Now it's affecting them more in a collegiate level, amateur level. But when that starts to trickle down and now it's going to take away your paycheck because possibly some demographic is duping women to accept it, and then as soon as they accept it, they lose their livelihood from it. I don't think a woman's going to co-sign that. You're going to turn around and ain't going to be too many natural women on that basketball court pretty soon.
Now,
Like
ladies,
when
I would ask you
the
this right
soccer
now.
Olympic women, when they go against the high school boys and they lose to high school boys. This is Olympic soccer females losing to 15-year-old boys. Now they get to transition and now they get to play soccer. What jobs the women gonna have? I'm not going by fairness. I'm protecting women. Women need a position in this, and the women who's involved in it, who's in the sports, most of them don't want nothing to do with it because they
What would you
know
guys
they taking their money.
I
what would you
mean,
guys say to that?
as a
Like,
woman, we have it happen in all areas of work anyway. So, like, per dollar, women are only paid at like 80 cents per the man's dollar. So it's happening already, regardless of what profession we're in.
okay.
I don't believe that either.
So with that being said, though, again, that's not fair, right? So if it's not fair for you and it's not fair for these athletes, what's the answer to the question, right? If it's not fair for me, you know, I'm 5'10", 300 pounds. If I decided to start wrestling against Brittany tomorrow, you know, she was a bad motherfucker, but I might be able to win that. You know what I mean? But there might be something she's far better at than me because she's a woman. That
Right.
I just wouldn't have a chance against her, right? Because she's a woman, right? But what is the answer to the question then? Do we separate the trans athletes into their own group? Do we, compete by testosterone levels? Should there be an age limit where, hey, you have to start your transition? I know in swimming, and I this is the point I want to come back to, is that because of that Leah Thomas situation, the governing body for international for swimming competitions has said you're you have to start your transition by the time you're 12 years old before you can start competing with women as a trans person, because again you're not going through puberty as a man. You would go through puberty as a woman. it Me personally, I have a problem with having those conversations with children. I To me, that's one of those fine lines where that's bordering on child abuse. Why are we having conversations with kids at that early of an age? You know, but that's a conversation for another day. But what is the answer to that equation?
I love the testosterone, estrogen levels. Uh, it's yeah, it's so much gray because it isn't fair. Um, it's more or less fair to the woman when the man transitions into a woman and now they're on our playing field with us than it is vice versa, me transing into a man and going over. It's slim chances I'm gonna dominate on that side. So I love the testosterone levels, or maybe and then that becomes great too because it's like, okay, well, we got to go by the age you started your transing.
Right.
Like, did you go through puberty or not? Because um, jazz up against your daughter. That's not it's not going to be fair, and they're both transgender women. because Jazz never went through the puberty, but your daughter did. So
Yeah,
it's
and to that point,
unfair.
you said Jazz started her transition at 9, right? Right? It's
Hmm.
9.
And
Be-
doesn't sound like a man at all.
my daughter started her transition at 18. So
See,
we're talking about somebody who completely went through, you know, puberty as a boy, as a man, was raised that way, and then so I'm assuming, if she started her transition at 9, she was raised as a woman. There's a difference there, right?
huge. Because even
It'll
those
be
two going up against each other is unfair.
right. It has to be in multiple classes within the same sport. Similar to powerlifting. Powerlifting has that also. When the powerlifters they have a section when it's natural, and they have another section where I guess you can just shoot whatever you want. They
Oh
actually
wow.
have two different. They have two different sections for powerlifting. They can do that the same for the a transgender league.
Wait, so in powerlifting you can be juicing, and they got a whole
Yeah.
different section for you?
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't know that. That's news to me. Yeah, learn something new every day. It, so it that was a conversation I had too, and I said, you know what? I'll be honest with you. I guess then it would be okay. I'd be okay with it. We were talking baseball, right? And everybody goes, well, Barry Bonds, Mark McGuire, these guys, Sammy Sosa, these guys aren't getting into the Hall of Fame because they were juicing. My retort to that was, yeah, but how many of the pitchers were they facing were juicing? How many of the
Right.
guys in the outfield were juicing? Right? So yeah, they might have been juicing, but taking steroids isn't going to be able to affect your hand-eye coordination. You know what I mean? It's not going to.
They weren't even taking steroids. They were
Right.
taking this thing called the cream and the clear. And what that is that it recovers your body faster. So instead of working out 3 times a week, you can work out 6 times a week. But that individual still has to put in that work. So they're just receiving something to do more work. To me, that's not even cheating.
Right.
That should be something that should be sold over the counter.
So then, in that case, right? If you're taking it because let's face it, we're in the steroids era in sports. You know what I mean? If you tested everybody in the NFL, you probably get 90% return on steroids. You look at those dudes. These are the biggest, fastest, strongest athletes in the world in the
Right.
NFL, the NBA, MLB. If it's okay for them to juice, is it okay for you know a female to male athlete to come in and do the same thing and then take over their sport? I say it's fair. I mean, if they're already juicing, why not?
That's a woman's decision when it comes to their sport. They get the final say.
I do want to say this really quickly as we're wrapping up that conversation, and this isn't in fairness to sport because that's the conversation we're having. I want everybody to understand we're talking about fairness in sport. We're not talking about whether it's right for you to be trans, right? We're not having that conversation. I want to point out really quickly that the violence against trans people, just for being trans, we don't support that here. That sounds about right. We don't support being violent towards people just for being who they are, black, white,
Right.
gay, straight, any of that. If you want to be trans, you want to be gay, you want to be straight, you want to fuck a goat. I don't care if you want to walk around, with and paint yourself polka dotted and purple. If you're not hurting other people, if you're not, a mass murderer, you're not a piece of shit. Because let's face it, every group of people in this world has assholes in it, right? You should be able to live your life the way you want. You know, it's not my penis. You want to cut yours off and have a vagina, or vice versa. You want to take your vagina and get a penis added on. There should be no one in this world that should tell you that you can't do that, right? The only conversation we're having today is if you do so, right? Is it fair for us to compete against each other? And I don't think we got to. I don't think there is. I don't think there'll ever be with just like we were talking about gun control and all that last week, right? I don't think there is a solution where everyone is happy, but I do think there is a solution that'll kind of piss off everybody, and maybe that'll be the one that works.
As usual.
All right. So wrapping that up, Jeremy, we're going to let you take the floor and run with your financial points for the day. Go ahead and have at it there, sir.
Okay, so July 13th was my birthday, and they announced the CPI for June. CPI is Consumer Product Index. So they gauge how much more you got to spend from year to year. So we went up 9.1%, meaning whatever you bought in June 2021 is going to cost you 9% more in June 2022. And due to inflation, that price is just going to go up and up and up. So because your fiat, your money that you have in the bank is weaker than usual, there's some strategies that you can take that money and make it work for you more efficiently. So I'm gonna give you three examples, especially during the recession that we're in, to help you have your money work for you better. So first example is it's called an ETF. That's an index fund where they take the Fortune 500 companies and they take a bunch of the best, and it's called an ETF aristocrat. So to be an aristocrat, that means they pay you for the last 25 years, they've been paying you more and more every single year. So to the rate, say for you have a savings account and you get 0.01% or 0.1% every year. Turn around, you got $20,000 in your savings and you only come out with $1.24 for the whole year. If you park $1,000 in an ETF, you'll get back the $1.24 the first month. Now it's not making you rich, but you're just making money over money you're not supposed to touch in the first place. So the best example for an aristocrat ETF is called NOBL. So you can look that up, possibly on your Webull, your Robinhood account. Just do your due diligence, put a little bit of money in your ETF, the NOLB, and you should be good to go on the long term. Midterm, something it's stable, but you can make money in the near future. I would say Apple for two reasons. Last month they had an announcement that they're going to have a new AirPlay. So, everybody, we have our laptops, we have our tablets, we have our phones, and we want to customize. Now, the new AirPlay model, you can customize the console in your car. So that's going to boost up the stocks. And another thing, there's been a chip shortage. Apple is now making their own chips. They no longer have to deal with anybody else. So those are two major factors that Apple, they're going to skyrocket in the next couple of years. And the short term, the most scariest and the most volatile is Bitcoin. Now and I'm just talking 2 weeks ago, Bitcoin was about $19,000. Now it's about $22,000. So if you put just a little bit in there, say you put $100, $500, $1,000, you don't have to buy a whole coin. But whatever percentage that stock goes up, if you want, you can shave some of that off and put that money in your pocket in the next 3 business days. Example, this weekend, I have a little bit of Bitcoin. Bitcoin went up maybe from 2,100 to 21,000 to 22,000. Now, because I don't have a whole Bitcoin, that's $1,000 in profit. So I have a percentage. So I made about $150 by doing nothing. So if we could train ourselves to understand when the regular money is diminishing in value, we have to transition it in a different form for it to be strong and to make us money on a short term and long term basis. So it's the Aristocrat ETF, Apple, and Bitcoin for long term, mid term, and short term resolution. Those are the best plays you can do for now. If I find anything else, sounds about right. I get the last segment, I'll hook you up.
I appreciate that, man. And you touched on the things that we should be looking into, things we should kind of invest in. Is there anything you can say right now that we should avoid?
Well, you should avoid, there's a thing called REITs, REIT. Those are similar to ETFs where these are companies who buy up properties, and you can buy shares in property buildings. So, for example, a company that buys housing
Hmm.
or a company that buys office buildings are diminishing because people are going remote, and going back into the office it's not as rapid as people thought. A lot of people are staying. And now when it comes to just homes, residents, we're going into a bubble that's going to be worse than 2008. So if you can stay away from REITs, anything that has to do with the real estate until the bubble pops, stay away.
Hey, there he has it. This has been Sounds About Right, where we don't always know what the hell we're talking about, but we make this shit sound good.
Sound about right?
Yeah, I want to thank my guests and my boy Jeremy, who's always with me. Brittany, let everybody know where they can find you at. What's going on with you? What you got coming up?
Yeah, you guys, thanks again for having me. I do apologize about those technical difficulties I had, but you guys can find me on YouTube at the Melanin, but it's spelled Melanin. Melanin is M3lanin. So you guys can find me there. And I'm just living. I it's a lifestyle vlog, so we just live life.
Hey, amazing. So everybody check her out again. The Melanin. Melanin spelled with a three instead of the E. Make sure you like and subscribe her channel. Go support our girl Brittany. Hopefully, we can have you come back on later on down the road. You were a pleasure. Again, making us look good here. That sounds about right. Thank you, Tanya,
Thank you,
our
Brittany.
showrunner, who came in and actually had some very poignant opinions as well. Hey, it's been a pleasure. Till next time.
1,